Good to see everybody. Thanks for being here this evening. So, as we have been kind of crawling through the teachings of the Eightfold Path, and starting with this sutta, as we did back in September, the probably most famous discourse, The Turning of the Wheel of the Dharma, which is highly correlated to the teachings of the Four Noble Truths. But that's not where the Buddha starts. He starts by talking about awakening to a middle way. We talked about that, and that he came to this middle way. He came to this understanding of a way, we would probably say in colloquial terms, a way of living in this world, by developing these 8 dimensions of our humanity. With speech, perspective, imagination. We've talked to them. We'll go through all of them. Last week I spoke about voice. So we are in Samavacha, is the teaching here, generally taught as right speech, which makes me cringe slightly to say, because it sounds like here's the rules of how one should speak if you want to be a good Buddhist. And I have not famous for my right speech, I must say. So I think, first of all, as I've said many times, we can do without the word right. We don't need it. Speech, vacha, is fairly okay. Speech, communication, but like I said last week, I think the best way to think about vacha is voice. And remember, with each of these dimensions of the path, what we are supposed to do with them is to cultivate them, bring them into being. And I'm doing it right now. How do we bring our voice into being? And I thought I would offer the traditional frame on this teaching, because I think it's helpful and I think it's useful. And also I think it's complicated. It's not absolute. You're not going to be able to do it all the time. So there are kind of 5 training suggestions on how to navigate talking, mostly communicating with others. And so this is really how the voice that we project out, how do we relate to the world? How do we talk to other people? And as I mentioned last time, one thing to reflect on is, can we get to a place in our life, and maybe we can't actually fully get there, but can we get to a place in our life and our practice where the inner voice and the outer voice are kind of very similar? And when I talk to whoever I talk to, I'm always talking to this people in the same voice. I don't have to manipulate or change or modulate depending on who I'm talking to, which a lot of times we find we have to do that, and we find that can be exhausting, and it can also feel very inauthentic. So we'll just kind of go through these 5. I'll just say what they are, and we'll kind of walk through them slowly. Is it true? Am I speaking in honesty? Is it useful? For what purpose am I using these words? Is it of benefit to others? Is it kind? Is it friendly? Is it non-divisive? Is it harmless? Is it timely? Is it appropriate? Is this the right time to have this conversation? And the other one I think that's most important, that's not always included, and I'll speak about why that might be the case, is, and what am I saying? Is it authentic or is it real? Am I really coming from a place of my truth? So, they're kind of obvious. We can kind of reflect on them. Some of them are a little more nuanced and complicated than others. But we can kind of think about these. So the first one is, and this is the most obvious one, is what am I saying? Is it true? Is it actually true? Am I being honest? And I think honesty is important. Can you be honest 100% of the time? Should you be honest 100% of the time? Probably not. But, on an inner voice level, can I at least be honest with myself about the fact that I'm not being totally honest, or being totally transparent might be another word that we would use here. So again, we want to this is why right speech is problematic. These are kind of guardrails. They're mindfulness practices. They're things that we can consider. Because some Buddhist teachers will say, like, it's never appropriate. It's always unskillful to be untruthful or to tell a lie. And I think that I call a little bit of bullshit on that. I don't think the Buddha likes absolutes. And so these are ethical dimensions. They're not moralistic dimensions. Okay, there's a difference. They come from the Sila path factors. And Sila is more of an ethical orientation than it is morality. And so this Buddhist word Sila sits kind of somewhere awkwardly between morality and ethics. But ethics is very, very personal. Where morality is sort of the rules of the world, laws, thou shalt not. The Buddha does not do this thou shalt not business. So we have to be careful about some of these things. So, is this place coming from a place of honesty? Is it coming from a place of transparency? And that's just something to consider before we talk. Whether you do it or not, it's not right or wrong. It's something that I think all of us do to some degree. Some people clearly have no interest in being truthful, as you've probably noticed, is talking to other people in the world. But it's something that we can kind of hold ourselves to. It's a nice guideline. It's a training guideline, I think, for practice. The other one interesting, I think, is and this is one I think that we fail miserably at. And if you've ever looked at a social media app, you know that this is true. Is this useful? In some contexts, they would say, like in a retreat container or even in a monastic setting, is what I'm saying, does it improve on the silence? And a lot of the times, not so much. And I'm pretty guilty of this. I can get caught up in idle chatter and gossiping and talking shit and just kind of like blathering about. We do a lot of this. And this isn't something that we need to feel bad about. We don't want to feel like it's wrong, or we really got to stay out of the morality on this stuff, especially with communication. But is it useful? Is it helpful? Am I offering any information that might be helpful to somebody? It might be of use. It might be of service. Another way to say that is for what purpose is this? Do I just feel uncomfortable in the silence and I just need to say something? As we know, if you've ever watched the movie Pulp Fiction, there's an interesting moment where John Travolta and Uma Thurman are out having a dinner, and they have this moment where they're not talking. And then Uma Thurman says, "Isn't it nice when you can just share silence with somebody?" And actually, for most people, I think a lot of people can't do that. It's nice when you can just be with somebody for 5 or 10 minutes and not talk, not feel compelled to talk, not feel awkward about the silence. Those of you who have been on retreat, this is a very, very big undertaking that we do when we go on these insight retreats. We remove talking for multiple days on end. And I'm sure you can notice there's a benefit to that, the noble silence. And so in many ways, we just try to use language. If you're having a yogi job and you're working in the kitchen and you're cooking, you might have some functional silence. But it's a very interesting practice. And I think one of the ways that this can be very interesting is just noticing when you're uncomfortable with the silence. Noticing that you're not talking, the other person isn't talking, feeling that kind of emotional contagion with the other person, the restlessness, the desire, the need to chit-chat or just fill the space. And just kind of hanging in there for a minute. Going, no, I'm just not going to talk. What is that like? What is that like? And so, not talking, not using the voice is as effective, sometimes more effective than what we might be saying is what we're not saying. So that's just something to bear in mind. And so when I use the word mindfulness in this capacity, I think it's interesting one of the ways mindfulness can be very kind of pragmatic is just to bear something in mind. So if I'm communicating with somebody, I might be kind of bearing in mind loosely, like, is this true? Is this honest? Do I really need to say this? Is this of use? Is there any purpose to this? And just kind of having a little bit of that going on is a really great way to kind of help craft and develop and to cultivate our voice. So these are kind of the tools that we can use to chisel out a voice that we feel good about what we're saying. We feel articulate. We feel like we've thought it through. We're not just like verbally letting the words come out, or just kind of like unleashing that in a kind of reactive way. Talking can be very reactive. Is this kind? Is this friendly? Is this, am I talking with the desire? So one of the ways that you could think about this in very pragmatic terms is I'm talking to somebody, is there a desire to connect? Is there a desire or a wish? I'm speaking in a way that's kind because I'm trying to find, and I would like to find a way to connect with this person, to make a connection, and then listening from a place of wanting to understand where they're coming from. Perspective taking. There's a great book written by a guy named Dan Siegel called Mindsight, which could just be called mindfulness. It's kind of his version of the word, but it's really about perspective taking. If somebody says something we don't agree with, or somebody says something that we don't like, can we just imagine, gee, I wonder what their experience is. I wonder how they came up with this perspective. I wonder where they're coming from. I wonder what it's like to walk in their shoes, rather than just reacting. So kindness is also, again, all of these dimensions of cultivating voice, they're as much about as they are about listening as they are about talking. Right. So is there an intention, a wish to understand? Is there a desire to connect? And now if I'm with another person, even if I maybe don't like the person, or really not happy to be sitting with this person, or I don't know about you, but I find myself oftentimes with people that I really don't really want to be around, and that's a little bit awkward. And so can I use my voice to say, okay, I'd like to find a way to connect with this person. Maybe I ask them where they're from, or a question about their kids, or, there's a way in which chit chat, as we call it, can be very skillful. If there's a desire, if there's a wish to connect, or to understand where they're coming from, or to just kind of be, as we say, friendly, civil. There's not a lot of friendly, civil discourse that goes on. This is where the internet is a nightmare. You could blow that thing up. None of this really happens online. And so not to go there, and I probably will go there actually in weeks to come, because I think it's a conversation worth having, is what is finding your voice or right speech, what does this practice look like in the digital space? Commenting on a YouTube video, going on, posting online. I mean, that's just your voice in a digital format. And I bet you, and this is definitely true, people say stuff on the internet that they would never say to another person in their face directly. And so that's a whole we could do a whole series on that. But we do have to understand, I think it's important for me to understand that is also me practicing or cultivating, or, using my voice in a way that's friendly, that's not divisive, or trying to, kind of cram my view or my opinion down other people's throats, or trying to get that across. This is very hard. And also, it's important to notice when you're in an exchange with another person, you're talking to somebody else, and there is a friendly exchange, there is kindness going on. It just feels good. And interestingly enough, when kindness is happening, when I'm talking to somebody in a friendly way, it's a lot easier to tell the truth. It's a lot easier to be honest. It's a lot easier to be purposeful. And so these kind of ideas can really kind of team up in a way to help us kind of craft our voice. It's like, gee, I'm being honest, I'm being interested, they're interested, there's a friendliness going on, and then we like this. This is what discourse, this is what human communication can look like. I mean, at this point in my life, I've been around for a while now. It's like probably the thing that I value the most, one of my favorite things to do, that I find the most meaningful, is to have a meaningful conversation with another human being about something that I'm interested in. That's kind of as good as it gets for me at this point. Good conversation is not easy to come by. And so I go out of my way to try to have conversations with people that are meaningful, that are important, that are relevant on a fairly regular basis. So there's that one. The other one I think is very interesting, that requires a lot of planning and a lot of thoughtfulness, is the timeliness nature of this. Is this the right time to have this conversation? Which at first glance kind of almost seems like not so important, not so interesting, but I find that if I need to have a difficult conversation with somebody, which I often do, maybe there's confrontation, maybe I feel upset, maybe I need to bring up something that happened in the past, when you have to have a kind of important conversation that might have some charge to it, might have some heat to it, might be a challenging conversation. For me, it's very helpful to be like, is now the right time? And that question first arises, is the right time meaning like, am I in the right mind state to have this conversation? Am I even capable of having this conversation? Like if I'm a little bit angry with you or if I'm a little bit pissed off with somebody, I probably shouldn't have the conversation with them whilst I'm angry and pissed off because it's not going to go very well. I'm probably going to come across being blaming or defensive or kind of short or curt or cutting. So I think it's really important that when we know we have to have an important conversation with somebody, a charged conversation, a conversation that may have a bit of conflict to it, that we make sure that it's not just the right time for me, but is it the right time for them? Sometimes I even find it's interesting and important to even ask them to say, hey, listen, I really need to talk to you about something that happened that's a little bit difficult for me to talk about. Is now a right time? Sometimes asking people for permission to say, hey, can we talk about this? I'd like to talk to you about this, whatever this incident was, is very, 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 very helpful. Because how many times have you had a conversation that went really poorly, and the main reason it didn't go well was because the timing was shit? So the timing, the appropriateness, and this is where mindfulness is so important, because you can kind of, as they say, read the room. You can kind of feel into the whole social structure of the space and be like, I don't think this is the right time to bring this up. And so that's really kind of a great mindfulness practice of being able to monitor those things, because sometimes the success or the failure of the conversation largely depends on the timing. Is this the right time for this conversation? Or even asking for permission or saying, hey, I need to talk to you. Can we find a time? This oftentimes is good. I've worked in a lot of clinical various workspaces that are highly charged, addiction treatment centers, jails, institutions like that. I haven't worked in those places in a while, but I found that in those spaces, this is really where that practice came to life from. I'm like, okay, I need to find the right time to talk about this. And also part of the right time is, do I even have my ideas worked out? Am I even ready? Do I even know what I want to say? Like, I'm pissed off and I need to confront this person. I need to have this hard conversation, but I don't even really know I don't really have my thoughts worked out. Right? This happens to me all the time. It kind of happens to me right now. I teach a lot. I'm on the screen a lot. I'm online a lot. And a lot of times it's like, I have to make sure I'm ready. I have to be prepared. A lot of times we go into conversations or we go into situations where we maybe do need to talk in a way and we're just totally unprepared. Have you ever done that? You go in totally unprepared and you just kind of flail and you walk away going, you don't even know what the hell happened, right? The last one, and then we'll open it up for some dialogue, which sometimes is included and sometimes it's not. I think it should be included because I think it's really important, and that would be, is what I'm saying, whether it's timely or true or kind or any of these other criteria, is it real? Is it authentic? Am I actually speaking this in my own voice? For me, this is kind of the one that's the most important. Because you know what? It might be honest, but it might be totally inauthentic. And people can smell that shit. You ever have somebody apologize to you in a way that was really inauthentic? It kind of falls flat, Or maybe you've done it, It's like, and so that is, authentic is so important. Maybe it's a little bit dishonest. Maybe it's a little bit unkind. Maybe it's a little bit not useful. Maybe it doesn't measure up in all these. But sometimes it's just like we just need to be real. Like, I just need to say this, And I think that this is definitely the hardest one. This is why I think we have to really be clear that we understand this whole dimension of the teachings on right speech as just really much a practice. And we can just kind of consider these things. But this thou shalt not, and I know a lot of Buddhist teachers and a lot of people in the space who really get cagey about this stuff. Like, they're real hard, fast rules. Thou shalt never speak dishonesty. It's like, well, That's pretty dishonest. If you think you're gonna, if you think you're never gonna be dishonest, now I know you're lying because nobody could pull that off. In fact, if you look at the research, especially Paul Ekman's research, even Dan Goleman's research, they've done actually a boatload of research on lying, and like, you know, people, everybody lies a little bit probably every day. We're doing it all the time. So if you're like, if you think you're like, I'm 100% honest, it's like you're totally bullshitting yourself if you think that that's the case. It's just really, really difficult to do. A lot of times we say things that aren't true. We don't even know that they're not true. It's just like, so having these very rigid guidelines around these can be very, very important to just hold these loosely, because what they do is, if I'm trying to carve out an authentic voice, which I think is what we're all trying to do, hopefully, these are great tools. These are great apparatuses. Being honest and transparent, and being kind, and noticing if it's the right time. Is it beneficial? These are all things that we probably all want to do anyway, and they can really help us get down to using our voice in a way that feels mindful, that feels present, and that feels like we're speaking from our heart rather than from our opinions. And it's a very vulnerable thing to do, actually. I think that, you know, I mean, if you take the practice seriously, if you like spent the entire day tomorrow really trying to kind of think about everything I just said, man, you would be busy all the day. Your Dharma practice becomes so alive when we kind of add it to this dimension of our humanity, because it's just happening all the time. We're talking all the time. We're listening all the time. We're working ideas out all the time. And so we can really be more engaged with the whole chitta process, the whole mind process, when we just kind of get more actively involved and thoughtful, and tuned into the way that we communicate with ourselves, with other people. So thank you, as always, for